Buonasera a tutti e benvenuti ad una nuova diretta. Questa sera abbiamo qui un ospite direi davvero d'eccezione. Questa sera qui con noi c'è Rolf Hichert ed è per questa ragione che adesso passerò dall'italiano all'inglese. So, good evening Rolf and thank you for being with us.
Okay. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. And many of you already know Rolf. Rolf, I would say, is the godfather of IBCS, and he's really also the founder of the IBCS Institute with Jurgen Faisst, and he has a very huge experience in business reporting and in business communication. So, of course, today we are going to talk about IBCS and reporting. Before doing that, I would like to ask Rolf to introduce yourself a bit.
Well, as you can see, I'm an old man. And I should quit now with these business issues, but it's still quite interesting and I can't quit. Well, actually my background is engineering. I got a doctorate in mechanical engineering, and then but working for McKinsey made me push my interest into business and economics, and I was a professor for 4 years in project management and later another 2 years for controlling. I was founder of a software company together with Jurgen Faisst, and you mentioned him before. And you know, uh, I had several large projects in how to improve reporting in some billion-euro companies. And after all these projects in banking, consumer goods industry, retailing, I realized that the central problem was the same. These reporting guys, they always complained that the bosses don't read their reports. And the executives on their side said, well, there's too much to read and it's not relevant to them. So this is partly my background. I'm now 75, so the last 40 years I've worked in this environment. And to be honest, it's not even these great BI tools now haven't changed much in this world. It's still the same issues, the same complaints of the bosses and the same complaints of the reporting guys. It hasn't really changed.
Yeah, I think that many controllers and analysts are still complaining about reports that are not understood by the bosses and
Yeah.
so on. So this is not a new story at all, I would say.
But just imagine if this magazine uh, journalist, he complains about his readers or the buyers of this magazine or this newspaper not reading his or her stories. I mean, then he would get fired probably because the reports and the newspaper articles should be read. And so it's the problem of the writers. It's not the problem of the
Yeah.
reader.
Yeah. Complaining, it's always not a, a good thing because I'm always thinking that before complaining, you have to look at what you are doing, of course. So,
Yeah.
okay. By the way, you already introduced that you were a McKinsey consultant you are an engineer, so you are not, let's say, a typical business graduate. And how and when started this idea to improve business communication and reports? What was the trigger?
Well, actually, the idea is rather simple, and it is came rather soon. I think in business we need communication rules like engineers have them for many years. Um, or look at the maps. I mean, they have rules. I mean, north is up, and the rivers are blue, the roads are red. I mean, there are rules for this. And in business reporting, we have IFRS and we have US GAAP and all these let's say, definition and calculation rules. But for visualizing things in tables or in charts, there's nothing like this. And so, um, I mean, look at the electrical plant in your house. I mean, the whole world, maybe there's a worldwide standard of how to do this. And think of the musicians. I mean, for hundreds of years now, they're using the same notation. And even musicians today use the same sheet music as Tchaikovsky or Beethoven or these guys did hundreds of years ago. And it is a worldwide standard. And if I ask you in business, how does actual look like, or plan, or good or bad variances, you say, well, today it's Thursday and it's red, and tomorrow it's Friday and it's blue, and there's nothing like this. And even your colleagues in other departments use complete different rules. And this was the start that I think we need something like the engineers, the maps and musicians have for a long time. Communication rules of how to do PowerPoints and BI front ends and PDF reports, whatever. There's something like a standard, and it's not existing. It's only, but that's even when you look at a, let's say, cash flow report or P&L statement, sometimes the costs are negative, sometimes the costs are positive. There's even
Yeah.
these simple rules like signs, plus and minus signs. There's nothing like this. And this was the start. Actually, I made maybe some 15 or 20 projects and large international big multi-billion companies, and then I found out it's always the same. It's always about actual, about plan, about millions and billions and plus and minus, and we need some let's call it a notation concept of how to define our rules. And then you go to a bank, an insurance company, and consumer goods, and industry, or a public company. It's always the same. I mean, they all have plus and minus, and they have costs and sales, and then they have good and bad variances and percentages and millions and billions. And for these issues, we need some standards, I think.
Yeah, and here we are. So we already have something, and but talking about standard, and before IBCS, we had the success rules. So you started then after McKinsey to be a consultant and to introduce this set of rules, right?
Well, I founded a software company, and I was CEO of this company for many years, and we did quite a lot of projects. This was in the 90s. I mean, it's almost 25 years ago. And already in these days, I tried to convince the customers that we have to some rules of doing this. And now I think, well, it started when I met Jurgen Faisst again. He was a former colleague and friend of mine, and he's a musician. And then the musician came and the engineer came, and we said, well, we need those rules. And we were kind of, let's say, well, maybe it was a little bit too early to call them standards. We called them standards, but I mean, a standard is something that's been used a lot, but it was not at all. Now it's different. I mean, now I think we have maybe a few thousand companies using it, and maybe 500,000 people have more or less been acquainted with these rules. And there are 10 software companies we have certified, and people like you, trainers who know how to train this stuff. And I think it's not in the beginning anymore, but it's a long way to go to make it an international standard. There's a lot of work to do, but I mean, you musicians, it took them a few hundred years to get their standards, and so I mean,
Yeah, hopefully we will be faster. Hopefully, but time has changed, and probably we will be faster. I think, and because I remember that my first my first um, the first time that I got in touch with IBCS, it was not yet IBCS. I remember the success rules
Yeah. Well,
present.
they are part of IBCS. I mean, these
Yeah,
rules.
now they are part, but
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Well, the idea really was like this. I mean, either you make money and you have, let's say, 10 or 12 projects per year. And then we decided, well, 10 or 12 projects per year, maybe even some more, you cannot change the world. I mean that's not a lot. And then the idea came up to make it public. So the success rules, you have them in your at your wall. I see the poster at
yeah,
in your wall
exactly.
back there. And these success rules, we made them public. That means open source, or let's say Creative Commons, how we call it. And so everyone can use it, translate them, and use it, and it's for free. So this has really changed the world, because then suddenly hundreds and even thousands of people and companies are now trying to adapt this. Because the interesting thing, there is no competition. It is so
Yeah,
funny. You always think, okay, it might be something in New Zealand, or in Korea or Japan or United States. No, it's not. I mean, we have now more than 8,000 members in our association in 120 companies, and they all, sorry, 120 countries, and they all tell us, no, in Argentina or Mexico or whatever, no, we don't have this. And so I think, why isn't this clear that we need some rules? And now the problem is, I've talked to many controllers and people doing these reports. They tell me it's limiting their creativity standards. And this is so weird, because I mean, just think, the musician says, using these music notes, it's limiting my creativity. It's
I
not.
don't think so.
No,
Yeah,
but I mean, this would be the same. I mean,
yeah.
the people tell me it's limiting their creativity.
And I would say that the music is more creative than controlling and then
Probably.
accounting,
Yeah.
I would say.
And there is much more, let's say, flexibility, and many more variations in music, and it's so much more difficult, I think, to put, let's say, music on a sheet of paper. I mean, that's so much easier to it. What we are doing, because it's all about sales and costs and headcount and stuff like this. It's I think it's so much easier than having this idea of doing this with music. And maps are simple too. Maps, because I mean, it's just a picture of a bird's view, and it's also easy. But it took them hundreds of years until north is up, and in Australia it's also north is up, and these rules are very practical, very practical. And
Yeah,
so, yeah,
and we have these rules in our real life, like road signs and things like
yeah.
that, and we didn't even notice it. We
Well,
are just using them.
it's practical that we have made a decision in Europe that we drive on the right hand side of the road. I mean, that's practical. Just at night, you you meet someone, and yeah, and you have to stop, because you don't know on which side he is crossing you. And so there are so many rules. Traffic signs is a good example. Of course, there are countries, they have their special size, but when you go through Europe, I think, I'm right now in Italy, and they have the same rules as we have in Germany. I mean, it's the same. And they
Yeah,
also drive on the right hand side, which is practical.
yeah. Thanks
But it
God.
took also it took hundreds of years. I mean, this wasn't always like this. I mean, to have these rules.
Yeah, we take it now as something that it's really normal and as given, but it was not like that. So
Well,
probably in
look at,
business
yeah.
we need a bit of time to get used to IBCS probably and to other standards. And
Well, let me tell you one story.
yeah,
I'm right now at the Lago Maggiore, and this house we bought maybe some 10 years ago. So there were all these sockets with these
Yeah,
three
the
prongs.
Italian. Yeah,
Yeah, and I had to cut at least 10 or 20 of these uh, plugs. I had to cut because they didn't fit. And now here in Italy, I mean, they have now a combination, at least here,
yeah.
in a
Now
combination
it's
where
standard
where
like that.
but then I lived in Switzerland for almost 40 years, and they have another another
Yeah,
tricky, so where your plugs don't fit in because they have these three prongs. So I mean, you find this all over the world, and in business, we just don't have it yet. No, we don't. If
yeah,
I if I ask you how does actual look like, or plan, or budget, or how does a positive variance and a negative variance look like, or millions and billions and time and structure? No, I mean, you make up your decision every day, and that's it. And
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And we are talking about simple things, so it's not that complex. And
put it on.
what we say in IBCS that applying the basic rule is pretty simple, I think. So, but we still have some people are still skeptic about adopting a standard. What do you think is the biggest hurdle in the adoption of IBCS?
Well, first of all, it's not only actual plan and budget. There are some quite a few tricky things, and I think you need let's say, at least a 1 day course, or even maybe a training or a consultant to get the basic ideas. And then there are two stages. At the beginning, people complain about the limitation, as I said, about the limitation and flexibility, because you cannot decide how actual or how budget or plan or forecast look like, because we have made suggestions and they're quite practical. So this is the first stage. Said that, the fear, they are limited, the creativity is limited. And later on, it's actually another thing, it's transparency. These guys and girls reporting, suddenly the bosses understand their reports, and the communication is completely different. You suddenly you produce reports in a large organization. These bosses get, let's say, many reports from different divisions, countries, and business lines, and what have you, from HR and logistics and production. They get all these reports, and suddenly they all look the same, and they understand them. And these controllers, you don't need them anymore to explain their reports, because I mean, people understand it. And so then suddenly everything becomes more and more transparent. And this is not always what people like to have. I mean, you would like to have transparency, but not in your own area. You like to have
Yeah,
the
in the area of
transparency.
someone else,
Yeah,
probably.
especially if you have some problems. And this transparency issue is really you don't have to underestimate it. It's really something that happens. People come up and say, "Well, we like transparency, but not so transparent." And this, especially when we go for public reports. I mean, these annual reports in large
Yes.
organizations. I think we have three or four. There's this Swiss Post, and there was one project in Philips and Eindhoven, and there's some large organization applying this in their annual reports. I mean, the public reports. But this doesn't work. I mean, it will take another 100 years, because they
Yeah,
want to cheat. They want to cheat, and
yeah.
scaling and everything is not consistent.
Sometimes the annual report is more a marketing
Yes,
document
yes,
than
you're right.
something related to transparency.
Well, I mean, maybe sometime the I don't know, the regulators will demand that there's no betraying and the charts, with cut axes, or you click through a report and there's a different scale on every single page. I mean, this is absolutely useless. But when you go, it's look, have a look in the Swiss Swiss Post financial report. It's a public report, well done, and it says on the first page when you open it, it says 1 billion Swiss francs is 20 millimeters, which is something. I think it's, if you are an architect, I mean, it's normal that you're using a certain scale for your drawings and your plans. But I mean, actually, I mean, the different business lines, they're using absolutely the same scale.
Yeah, and this sounds it's something that if you hear it out of the context, you say, "Oh, that's reasonable. That makes
Yeah.
sense," and it's something not that
No.
you would say this is not, let's say, the idea that will change the world, but it's revolutionary because nobody is doing that.
Yes, I don't know why. I think it's because you want to convey something that's not the reality. It's not true. You want to show something that's not really the real data. And you somewhat betraying. I think when a few years ago, I made an analysis in TV charts and newspapers, magazines, website, and there were about 50%. That means every second chart had some kind of manipulation. You know, having missing years on a time scale, or cutting the axis, or cutting the bars, or doing some kind of, let's say, miss or changing the visual, which is not really consistent with the data, which is weird, huh? It's
Yeah, it's definitely weird.
yeah,
So
yeah,
another question
yeah.
for you, but before going to the question, I would say that to who is listening to house, if you have any question, you can post it on the chat. If you have problem with English, you can also write in Italian, so potete scrivere anche in italiano, io traduco per voi in caso, ma Rolf parla un po' di italiano, in realtà lui non l'ha
Yeah.
detto, ma un pochettino lo parla. And so Rolf, I have another question. Why do you think it's important to learn IBCS, for a controller, for an analyst? What do you think is the benefit that he or she can have?
Well, I think first of all you have to be convinced that some rules of reporting are helpful. I mean, usually what we do, we try to convince top management, the executives, the board, because otherwise it takes years when you start at the bottom. And once you have convinced the CEO, CFO, or the board that it is helpful to have some reporting standards, then we develop or the customer, whatever the company, they develop some kind of notation manual based on these rules. We call it a notation manual, something like a, let's say, corporate design manual, a manual with examples. How do our report pages look like? And this is the start. I mean, without some let's say document that is defining these rules, you cannot do. And I think if you don't accept this, if you don't think that's helpful, if you think it's nice that your reports look completely different than the reports of the office next to you, then okay, you don't do it. But I think it is very helpful, if not for the writer of the reports, but of the one receiving them, when there are some standards. I mean, it is. You get 10 different reports every week, and there is no consistency. And I think that's very helpful. And so I think you have to convince the let's say the board, the CFO, or the people higher up in the hierarchy, and then it works every time. I think I had the chance maybe 10, 12, 15 times to talk to the owner or CEO of a multi-billion company like SAP, Daimler, Bosch, or these large organizations. And in I think in 9 out of 10 cases, it worked nicely because I mean the people understand this right away, and then they okay more or less put pressure on the people lower down the hierarchy, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Uh, I'm not allowed to tell you details of some large organization, but sometimes I know one large consumer good. They have about 10,000 people being trained worldwide in these rules, and there are others. They work on this for 10 years and they haven't achieved a thing yet. Because I mean, it needs some pressure because changing is always
Yeah,
work and it is hard and it takes time and effort, consulting, and everything. But once you have done it, you have really a big
yeah.
advantage.
I have to admit that when I started to approach IBCS,
Yeah,
I was at the beginning skeptic too. I have to admit.
yeah.
Then the more I started to use them, the more I felt that I cannot do what I was doing in the past. So that's my feeling, at least. The more you are using them, the more you cannot use what you were doing in the past.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, that's really. I hear this quite often. And just do one thing. You go in the internet and make a Google search for, let's say, good dashboards or perfect dashboards or something like, or good PowerPoints or good report pages. You get a mess. I mean, there's nothing like a standard. It looks black and white and colorful and left and right. It is really nothing like a standard. And then you look for, let's say, IBCS compliant reports, and it looks quite nicely and quite consistent. And of course, it needs the tools. I mean, if you do this with Excel and you're not an Excel professional, it is very difficult to do this in Excel. And many reports are still made in Excel. And even if you're using now, let's say, Power BI or these tools, the standards are, well, sorry when I say this, are ugly and useless. I
Yeah.
mean, the colors are not for meaning, for instance. The colors are for decorative purposes and not for meaning. Just look at this, this technical the engineer drawing this gearbox, and once he's ready, he starts making blue and green and red and doing all kinds of finishing his drawing. No, it's black and white and it's showing the gearbox. And colors are so important for our, let's say, communication and our understanding. I wouldn't spoil it and make it look nice. I mean, that's, people talk about their reports, they look nice, good
Yes.
looking, I mean, fancy looking. And it's not about fancy looking, it's about understanding. And so, yeah. You don't, I mean, Mr. Beethoven, he was not evaluated for his great looking sheet
Yeah.
music.
Not at all, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's really, you talk to people in
Yeah.
dashboard design, and
I
they
can
talk
tell
about
you. Yeah. Yeah.
the beauty of their
Yeah,
implement.
yeah. I can tell you, I had a boss many years ago, and we were doing a report, and he told me, so make the report nicer because the figures are so bad that at least you have to make the report nicer. So this was an excuse.
Yeah. Well, but this is typical. I mean, and the problem is, I mean, they talk about the beauty of their BI solutions or their dashboards, um, because it's almost impossible to understand them without explanation. That's a big problem. And I think if you have a standard, you have some rules, suggestions, then people will understand what you're showing, and because the scales are the same, months and years and quarters and days have a certain notation, actual and plan and forecast have a notation and stuff like this, and then you understand it.
Yes, of course.
One thing, I mean, for instance, just talk about colors. For us, red is only to be used for negative variances, because in reports, variances, percentage, absolute are most important. But then people say, well, our corporate design needs red, and so they make the bars and the columns and line red. But then the whole idea of using red for meaning is dead.
Yeah,
It's not
yeah.
working.
I worked for a company, and they decided to use red for plan. So
Well,
plan was red.
well, there's a German big telecommunication company using magenta for
Yeah,
their,
yeah.
you know, maybe which company it
I
is.
know, I know, I know. But I
And
don't
they
say
wanted
that.
to use magenta for actual. And I mean, this is terrible because I mean, this is a highlighting or highlight color, magenta or red or something. Well, that's it. I mean,
Yeah,
once corporate design is more important than understanding, and corporate design is our big and actually our big enemy in these projects, because they think that the corporate design colors and layouts should be part of the charts and tables and stuff like this.
yeah, yeah.
I
So
think, yeah, go ahead.
you already said, but I think that we are still struggling with problems that are pretty old.
Yeah,
Um, because you have the experience of many years, but I think that we are always talking about the same things.
yeah. I mean,
Even if the technology is evolving, then we still have the on the other side the same problems.
look at the pie charts. These stupid pie charts. I mean, one-dimensional thing, and you cannot compare them. You cannot use negative numbers. It's these pie charts. Mr. Brinton, and I think he was American engineer. He wrote this book in, I think, 1905 or 1910, and says, forget these stupid pie charts. There are better ways of transporting information. And these radar charts, these radar charts. I mean, and many spark lines are absolutely wrong. There's so many things they have been discussed for 20, 30, 40 years, but you find them all over the place. 3D charts, and
Yeah,
especially what I think is a big problem when visualizing, not having a consistent scaling concept. I mean, scale without a consistent scaling, you cannot compare and understand charts. And this is very important, the scaling, without, at least on one page, but if possible, in the complete report. Because I mean, you have sales in Iceland, and they will be much smaller than your sales to United States, probably. Yeah,
yeah. So yeah, we are always struggling with the same problems, but at least now we have. So we can follow another path, and I would say follow IBCS and discover so a kind of new world of reporting. And but there is another point which is very important, and I know you are a big fan of that, and is information density. Uh,
yeah,
because I know
I am.
and I saw many presentation of you where you were saying information density is very low in business reporting, even in
Yeah,
dashboard, right?
yeah. We talked about this. When you look at the sheet music of, let's say, of a conductor for an orchestra, there are maybe on one page there are 1,000 little black dots, and he's not complaining about the many dots because he needs the dots to understand the music. And the piano player has, maybe 500 or 1,000 little markers on this sheet of paper. And when you go to a typical dashboard or PowerPoint visual, there are 20 or 30 or maybe 50 values, which means that if you want to understand the full story, you have to switch to another page and look at 20 pages to understand the full picture. Here's sales, and here's cost, and here's headcount, and here's France, Italy, Germany, and When you put this on one page, the more you can put on one page, the easier it is to understand. I mean, given the fact, I mean, you can read it and it's a clear, it is clear. I mean, if it's too small, you can't read it. But if you go, let's say, to an 8-point font or even a 6-point font, you remember we have
Yeah,
discussed
yeah,
this example with a font, then you can have 1,000 or 800 values on one page. And instead of having 20 pages with 40 values, 40, and you spend, let's say, 30 seconds for each page, then you spend, let's say, 20 times as much, maybe 5 minutes or even more to see this one page. So for me, information density, if it's well done, I mean, it must be okay. It must be consistent and clear, and the notation must be important, is the key for success. Because then you understand your business. If you have not one, let's say, the development, the sales, the profit of one country per page or per website, but you have maybe all 50 countries on one page, then you see the complete picture, and this helps you. It is difficult to explain this, but people interested should just have a look at our examples, and this will really change reporting. Information density allows us to understand the big picture, the correlations, the relations, and it's actually the opposite what you learn on a PowerPoint course. They tell you put only a little,
yeah.
only not much on a slide, and that leads to 100 slides in the presentation. And I rather have 4 slides and spend 10 minutes on each slide.
Yeah, that's true. And also in my experience, I see many times a lot of reports, and then the most important thing is missing. So the summary and what summarize what you have in all these bunch of data, and so you are not
Yeah.
getting to the point because you have all I don't know, as you said, all the countries, all the plans, and so on, and then you don't have the summary of that. And
Well, but if the information density is high, you don't need messages, explanations. You just see it. This is Iceland, and this is the United States, and this is France, and you see the whole picture. And it almost needs no explanation or comments, no messages, because you see it. I mean, you see the variances, you see the differences, you see everything, because it's visual, it's right there. And so I think information density is not estimated, it's underestimated. It's not, hasn't got the attention that it needs. And we will work on this in the next, let's say, couple of months or so, publish some examples replacing let's say 10 dashboard visuals by one, and proving that it's easier to understand this one dashboard than these
yeah,
10 or
because
15.
also the new dashboards are really poor from this perspective because the information density sometimes is even lower than an Excel report. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
you see
yeah,
these
yeah.
big
Well, I mean,
numbers, in dashboards.
this is so stupid. I mean, this is just it's stupid, so stupid. I mean, uh, 6.5, 8.9, 17. This is so stupid. I think it's such a stupid idea. I don't know who made up. Even when you look at the Microsoft suggestions, they suggest to put big numbers, and sometimes the labels for these numbers are so small you can read the
You don't
numbers,
know
but you
what it
can't
is.
read.
Yeah, exactly.
It is such well. I mean, it's like speedometers. I mean, these speedometers you have, and all these funny, not necessary visuals. I think we just need basic rule. That means if you look at time, it's going from left to right. If you look at structure, it's bars. And if you look at, it needs not 20 different visuals. It's mostly about time and structure, and maybe two-dimensional portfolio charts and stuff like this. But 80% of what we report, maybe 90%, It's either a time development compared to something, or it's a structure compared to something, and that's it. That makes up
Yeah.
80% of our charts. And we don't need radar charts and stuff like this. We just don't need it. We don't need pie charts and funnels and these big numbers. I don't know if there's a name for this. I don't know if there's a name for these big numbers.
Cards. So some of them are calling cards, but I don't know
Well,
if
but
there is.
cards is well,
Yeah.
all these this yeah these tiles. Tiles are all these tiles.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
understand why they still, but it's maybe it's a fashion right now, and it will go back. It comes and goes, and I think.
Yeah. We don't know. So talking about fashion, then, are you expecting in the future? So
Well, I hope that IBS is not only called a standard, but we call it a standard, but
yeah.
it is not yet a standard. I mean, it is a standard. I think in Austria, Switzerland, Germany, we have quite a great success. I mean, some hundred, maybe even thousand companies are using this, and but I mean, in in the rest of the world, even in Italy, I think we have not much success yet.
Yeah.
But you will change it. You will
We are
change it.
starting. We are
You will.
starting. I think that. So my feeling is that the interest is growing also in Italy.
Yeah, yeah. Well, once you understand the idea, it's obvious. Then you have to go this way. I mean, you will
Yeah.
not change it and say, "Oh, in Rome we have different traffic signs than in Milano." I mean, it's very practical if the guy from Milano goes to Rome and he finds the same traffic lights, traffic signs. And this is the same with your reports. Once you get the idea, you cannot go back. I'm pretty sure. You have to go
I
back.
can confirm that. Yeah. Yeah. That's also my experience.
But come back now to the music. It took them. I've read a book some years ago about the development of music, sheet music, and music notes. It took them, I think, 200 years or something. 200 years. And we are now in this business. IBCS is now, I think, in year number 10 or year number 9, more or less. And so we have another 150 years to to become a standard. No, no. To now be realistic, I think once companies like SAP, Microsoft, and these companies are really offering solutions going this way, it will help.
Yeah,
I
because
mean,
I think that the softwares are playing an important role in that.
yes, yes, yes. It's. I mean, without software, there is no chance because you can ask people that they create these complicated things without tools. But they are now, I think, we have 10 software tools now. They have been certified.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that let's say Power BI gets certified, but we can say with the help of Power BI, we can solve this. It's not that we can certify Power BI. No, it's of course not.
No,
But
of
we can
course.
say with the help of Power BI or with the help of Excel, you can do it if you use tools to really apply this. If you ask me how long it will take, I don't know. Maybe another 10 years, maybe 20 years. I don't know. I hope. Um, But I mean, I see an increasing. It's more or less. I wouldn't say explode, but it goes faster and faster.
Yeah, I think there is a huge attention on data visualization in general,
Yeah.
and there are many experts with their own ideas, and
Yeah, but I mean, this. I think we have to be careful. I mean, we talk only about these business reports and economic reports. I'm not talking about visualization of mass data, of structured internet structures and stuff like this. I'm really talking about sales and cost and headcount and what the typical reporting does. And here we have a solution. There are still some questions to be solved, but we have a pretty good solution. And I think there is no way back. I mean, our book here, this about the this way, solid
Yes, solid
outline.
outline
This
hatched.
this will not go back. I mean, I think there are several thousand companies now using outline for plan and solid, I mean, dark gray or something for actual, and hatched for forecast. I mean, that's the beginning. Once you do this, you have already got, you get rid of these colors. I mean, then you can have the red and the green for meaning. And
Yeah.
this idea, I think that's new. The semantic, that everything that we do has in reporting should have a meaning. So I mean, if we use a color, if you use something, you use a visual, if you use a line or an area or bar or column, it should have a meaning. And not okay. I make a development. Let's say sales over time. Today is Thursday. Let's use a line, and tomorrow it's Friday, and we use bars. And this doesn't work. I mean, we need some basic rules to agree. How does the monthly grid look like, or the daily grid, or the quarterly grid? Because then we can compare different reports, because the report I get from department A will look the same as the report from department B. And this needs tools, I show. So we need three things: top management awareness and support, somewhere up there. We need tools. They're able to produce these reports, or BIs or PowerPoints or what have you. And we need a notation manual where these things are, examples and rules and stuff like this. And then we have it. I mean,
Yeah.
when you talk to people who have been through this process, they don't want to go back because they think it's, I was
Yeah.
so stupid. Why didn't I do this before? Because it's so obvious that it's helpful.
I think that nobody want to go back, and I'm always asking to who is skeptic. At least I always saying try. Let's give a try and try to use them.
Yeah, it works.
And
Well, to start a project, I'm just talking to a large German car company, and the only thing you can do, you take one table and one PowerPoint or BI, and you make it before and after. And then you say, okay, you can do what you want, but have a look. What do you want to have? This or this? And these people are not stupid, and they say, oh, well, let's go for this solution. So I mean, comparing the present stage with a new stage is the best way. Taking their own data and compare it, and let them decide, and they will do it. Your sound
I
is
think,
gone.
sorry, I think we are coming to the end of the interview. If there's no other question, I would say thank you to Rolf, and for your time and for your insights, and also backgrounds of the IBCS. And
Yeah,
let's hope that also in Italy we will have some success with IBCS
yeah,
in the next months. So we are planning also the first Italian IBCS seminar in February, and let's see. As I said, if you are skeptic, let's give it a try and try to use them, and then we can
it
always
works.
talk about that.
Okay, Simone. Well, thanks for inviting me. If anything comes up, I mean, you can invite me, or tell me, and I come back. Right now, I am in Italy, and you are too, aren't you? I mean, you are
Okay.
in.
Oh, it sounds like that we have a question. Fabio
Yeah,
is writing. I have a question. Then
I
let us know.
I
Let's
have a
wait
question.
if the question is coming or not.
I don't. I see. I have a question, but no question.
I don't know.
No.
Let's see. We don't see the question.
Okay, then.
Okay, maybe we will answer later. Okay. He said, "I love IBCS, so I am convinced." But I know Fabio. That,
Yesterday I got this comment.
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I know that
Okay,
Fabio is a
whatever.
very big fan.
The charts that are produced are very technical and not quite. Aha.
The charts that are produced are very technical and not quite what I'm looking for.
What is the technical chart? What
No,
is the
he got these comments probably on a chart, on an IBCS chart.
but what
People
is
say that are too technical because they are probably not full of colors, I guess. But
well
I
that are
mean,
very technical. I don't understand what a technical chart is.
yeah, probably because it's without colors. But I don't know. I'm just guessing,
What?
and
What?
difficult to understand. He's saying
Okay.
difficult to understand. I think that people should start to get used to that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, graphically it should be more appealing.
This is what
Well,
the
that's
people are saying.
exactly what I was saying. I mean, it's not. It's about the looks. I mean, it's not of understanding and rules. It's about good looking colors and colors are so important for me. I would never using for appealing because colors have a meaning and.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
we
That's
have
the shift that we have to do.
we have to do some more work to convince people.
Yeah,
I,
because even talking about music, even music, it's technical. So if you look at sheet music, it's technical. It's about the music and nothing more.
yeah. Well, it's about maps. I mean, you don't talk about the beauty of a map, but of the usefulness, whether you go from X to Y, and the usefulness of the map is important, and
Exactly.
not the looks. If it looks nice, I mean, the children when they learn music, they have little birds and little plants on these notes, and this is something where we are today. I mean, having these dash these what do you call them, the speedometers.
Yes.
Absolutely useless stuff. Absolutely useless. Well,
Okay.
let's see.
Good. Our time is over. So thank
Yeah.
you again, Rolf, and thanks to all of you that you are listening to us. And so see you next time.
Okay.
Ciao. Bye bye.
Bye bye.